Party and he's leaving California because he can. But he's created the suffering in California, so everybody else who can't afford to leave has to remain there under this communist, leftist ruler Mussolini and the single party rule of the Democrats. Okay, again, great. Happy he's waking up. But why does it take a guy like that who's obviously so smart so many years when it takes ordinary Americans 1 second to know that the Democrats are a leftist party? My own conclusion is he's weak. He wanted the approval of the cool kids, all of his peers. The only tech bro, if you remember back in 2016, the only one in that age range was Peter Thiel. And he got ridiculed. He came out in favor of Trump. All these other guys, they stuck it out because they were, in my opinion, too weak of personality to stand up to the mean girls, to the cool kids. And now he's finding out why. He's motivated by his wallet. He's motivated because of the billionaire tax that the California Democrats are trying to put through, which it's now been exposed. We talked about this yesterday. The Democrats have to lie about everything. Why? Because nobody would vote for their policies. They come out and tell you it's a billionaire's tax. We're just going to take a little bit of money from the billionaires. Don't worry about it. Oh, then you read the bill and you find out what? You find out, no, they're giving themselves the complete control to never have to go back to the voters. With a 2/3 vote in the House and their Senate, they can change the bill, put the wealth tax on anybody they want, at any price they want, at any range, or with any frequency. You might say, well, 2/3, I brought this up yesterday. Yes, I know California doesn't have a House. It's called whatever else it's called. 2/3, they already control more than 2/3 of those bodies. They already can do this, and they will do it quickly. Why? Because the money's in the middle class. That's why they never tell the truth. They make the middle class think, oh, we're going to go after the billionaires, those guys over there. And then they come after you. Keep in mind, 1913, the 16th Amendment authorizing the income tax, the founding fathers put in rules that made it an income tax or a federal tax of any kind, basically impossible because it had to be apportioned, sort of even for everybody. The 16th Amendment changed everything, and originally it was only for the rich guys. Now it's for everybody. This is how the left operates. Okay, so thrilled about Sergey Brin, but we all got to wake up. No voting for Democrats. If you're voting for Democrats, you're either retarded or you're in on the scams. Speaking of scams, all right, we're going to move because the question of the day is it all happening? Well, what do I mean by that? People like me, ordinary Americans, have been waiting. We've been watching all of this corruption, the Obama corruption, spying on Trump, going after the political enemies. January 6th was not the worst, whatever nonsense fairy tale the Democrats told you. In fact, it was created by the Democrats. Okay? Just like the SPLC had to create all the hate hoaxes like Charlottesville. Charlottesville doesn't exist as a meaningful anything if the SPLC doesn't pay for those Nazis to be there. That's it. We've seen these things. The Clinton Foundation, we're going to get into that later. The Clinton Foundation, one of the great criminal enterprises of all time. I will give it to them. Just great. I'm going to remove that and I'm going to put something else up here in a second. They are, we've been watching this corruption. If you're, somebody like me, okay, and an ordinary American, and what have we been waiting for? We've been waiting for stuff. We've been waiting for indictments, for people to be taken seriously and hopefully have justice be served. And we've been frustrated. Well, guess what? Todd Blanche gets in, and all of a sudden we get the SPLC indictment. We now got a Fauci indictment, not an indictment of Fauci, but of one of his underlings. We're going to get to that here in a second. And then, we've been seeing the fraud squad, Vance's fraud squad, suddenly start to make some hay. We got indictments of some Somalis. We've got RFK coming out and saying they're getting rid of a lot of this hospice fraud. And I think he said they cut off 500 hospices in California, and not one phone call from anybody who said, hey, wait a second. I'm a legitimate hospice. You're cutting off the funding for these sick people. Not one. Okay, what does that mean? They were all stealing our tax dollars. So we're starting to see things. This Fauci thing. Those of us who got irritated, and that's putting it mildly, during COVID, when the left threw sand, giant front end loaders of sand into the skate parks in California. I was living in California at the time, so I saw this stuff. Or they arrested the dude who was out in the ocean. They actually had to, he wasn't near anybody. You can go see I don't have it, but you can go see the video. The only thing he was close to was a shark, okay? And they brought him in, and now he's close to people where he could have transmitted something, and they arrested him because they didn't want anybody to be outside, okay? They tied up the nets so kids couldn't play basketball at the park. They forced now we know, poison of the COVID vaccine on many of us, okay? And as I think I heard Joe Rogan say the other day, you don't meet anybody who didn't get the vaccine who regrets that. But you meet a lot of people who got the vaccine that regret it. That's the sure indication that a vaccine is bad, okay? So what do we see? This morning we see one of Fauci's underlings is indicted. I'm going to play this. I might skip ahead because it's a 2-minute clip and I don't want to play 2 minutes, but I want to see if we can get the important information.
Out there in Washington.
Now, it is, Bill. The Justice Department has charged David Morins, a doctor, with conspiracy, claiming he concealed federal records to counter evidence that COVID-19 may have leaked from a lab in China, all to help restore a controversial coronavirus grant. Morins, a former aide to Dr. Anthony Fauci, testified before the House's COVID Select Subcommittee nearly 2 years ago about emails he'd sent in February 2021, claiming that he'd learned to make emails disappear after he received Freedom of Information Act requests.
Ever delete or attempt to delete a federal record?
No, but let me explain why. When I came there in 1998, we were instructed to delete emails or to move them into PST files frequently because they jammed the computer.
The Justice Department says Morins used his personal Gmail account to exchange non-public information. The indictment also claims an unnamed co-conspirator gave Morins wine for his, quote, behind-the-scenes shenanigans, then suggested he could push scientific commentary in a prominent medical journal advocating that COVID-19 had natural origins. That's a competing claim.
Okay. I'm gonna stop it there. You get the gist, okay? Finally, we're getting an indictment. Now, what does this look? Well, look, the facts, as you just heard. They used non-government servers so that when FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, requests come in, they could say, I don't have anything on my government email like that. Now, that's a now old trick started by Hillary Clinton and Obama and others. Actually, I think it might have even been Bill Clinton before him, but Democrats largely use an outside email account. What's the problem with that? Well, for starters, it doesn't have the security that the government system has because they don't care about security. All they care about is don't get caught from doing whatever they're doing. That was one thing. You also heard that he lied to get a grant for the COVID research. That means getting our tax dollars to pay likely for gain of function research. How do we make this stuff worse? We paid, stick it in the scam file, stick it in the theft file, trillions. They stole our money to do that research, which they then unleashed on us. Now, as a practical matter, let's talk about like we're a cop on a cop show. This guy is 78 years old. He played this game because everybody else was playing the game. He was either weak or he was a true believer. Either way, he went along with all this stuff for decades. He likely got paid, but by that piece you saw at the end where it said an anonymous source or unindicted co-conspirator gave him a bottle of wine, ordinary American view, got to be Fauci. He gives him a bottle of wine, maybe because he's not paying him as much as Fauci's making. Don't know. But is this 78-year-old guy going to go spend 5 years in prison or whatever the prison sentence might be for this? I doubt it. I doubt it. Fauci, they build these cases from the bottom up. I've watched enough cop shows, bottom up, okay? Let's see what happens with this. But this is maybe one of the indications that stuff is starting to happen. We need to be able to have society be comfortable that when people break the law like these guys obviously did around COVID, Fauci's been doing this forever and been getting paid too from the pharmaceutical industry. And we've talked at length about the corruption that exists on that side of things. But society needs to be able to see that these people are going to be punished. Not slaps on the wrist, not, oh, they're old, so they get to keep their pensions and stay out of jail. If this guy gets convicted, if he gets tried and then convicted, by the way, innocent until proven guilty. We have to prove guilt. That's the system. Obviously, I have a suspicion that he's going to be proven guilty. Why? Because he's guilty. So if he is, we might start to see some things happen here. Okay? Things might be happening. The SPLC thing, that's a very big deal. We've talked a lot about that. Now we got the Fauci crew. Okay? What else do we have? We got the JD Vance fraud squad. Suddenly we're seeing things happen. Suddenly we're seeing the Somalis start to get indicted. I don't really care about the Somalis. I want them out of the country. I want to go up the chain. The Somalis didn't figure out how to steal our money. They learned that from some nonprofit, Democrat-run nonprofit. I want those people. So things might start to be happening. Where else are they happening? Yesterday, this is kind of a confusing one, but I'm going to put it up anyways. I'm going to take a chance here. Yesterday, Chuck Grassley released a document that, hold on a second, that's not what I want. He released a document related to the Clinton Foundation. Let's read this together. Let's see if I can make that a little bit bigger. This morning, by the way, the great Margot Cleveland, if you are not following her, if you're not reading her stuff, you should be. She is unbelievably on most of these scams, certainly the Clinton stuff. This morning, Senator Chuck Grassley released the FBI Washington field office's 12-page electronic communication EC that opened a preliminary investigation into the Clinton Foundation. Its extensive evidence of potential pay-to-play criminality among the Clinton family confirms the politicalization and weaponization of the Department of Justice. Late last year, another trove of documents, also released by Grassley, summarized the origins of 3 separate FBI investigations into the Clinton Foundation, opened respectively out of New York, Little Rock, and D.C. As the Federalist reported at the time, those documents indicated that Ray Hulser, then head of the Department of Justice Public Integrity Section, did not support the investigation into the Clinton Foundation and withheld information from the U.S. Attorney's Office running the probe out of Little Rock. Ray Hulser, traitor. In other words, he was like Comey, who thought that Hillary was going to get in, and then and Comey was going to become the whatever CIA head or whatever he thought he was going to become. Hulser probably figured the same thing. Corrupt. You've heard guys like Dan Bongino talk a lot about in the FBI how these corruptocrats hid, and they had to sort of root them out. And it wasn't easy. What is this scandal? This is all of the information related to those 3 investigations that you heard about that had been started years ago into the Clinton Foundation. The Clinton Foundation, the greatest criminal scheme, maybe of all time, because it was right out in the open. The ordinary American point of view is that they created a nonprofit foundation where they could take in donations. The donors would get tax deductions. The Clintons would then take that money as bribes. I forget the stat, but it was something like 5% or something of the money that came in actually went to charitable things. And so this was a legal way for bad guys who wanted to get influence with Hillary when she was running for president and before when she was a Secretary of State, how they could get that. There were 3 investigations, Little Rock, DC, and what was the other one? New York, I think. And they had loads of information. And this guy Hulser was one of the guys who shut it down. Comey probably did too. Why? They shut it down because the Department of Justice was completely weaponized and turned into the militant armed wing of the Democrat Party. They wouldn't go after the crooks. They'd go after people like the Moms of Liberty and people who would protest outside of abortion clinics and freedom-loving people like people from January 6th, which was not was not an insurrection. Okay, it was a Fed op that wouldn't have existed in the way that we saw it without the feds instigating it. We're finally seeing some of this stuff. Now, this is not an investigation that's going on now. This is a release of documents. Why is he releasing the documents? He's essentially doing a public way of getting the information to the Department of Justice and putting pressure on the Department of Justice to say, now we, ordinary Americans, can see it. You might want to do something because we're going to be reading it. Read that whole article. Eye-opening. Okay? So the answer to the question, are things happening? Maybe. You know, we all know Obama was the head of it, head of the snake. He authorized the Russia nonsense through Hillary, Brennan, Clapper, all of them. He knew it was a lie. He was by the way, when he spied on Trump, that wasn't new. Obama spied on the US Senate. He spied on the press. He had been using American intelligence for a long time. A lot of ordinary Americans like me watched when the laptop nonsense came out. And you had all these idiots saying, oh, it's Russian disinformation. As I say all the time on the show, the people who believed that were either easily tricked, which means they shouldn't have their job, whatever it was, in the government or in the press, or they were in on it, which means they shouldn't have their job, whether it was in the government or in the press. Those 51 IC people who signed that letter, all of them should be fired if they still work for the government. If I was running a company that they were on the board of, I would fire them. 1, because they're traitors. 2, because they were stupid. They tried to convince people that it was Russian disinformation when it was obviously not. It was obviously the laptop. And Catherine Herridge, I've shown the clips before, she had the story the whole time. And CBS wouldn't let her show it. Are things happening? Maybe. I'm not getting ahead of myself, and I'm not getting my hopes up. But it seems like Todd Blanche is really having a different effect. The other big thing was he brought in Joe DeGenova, who was a former prosecutor, now current prosecutor, I think to lead the grand conspiracy case. And if you watched him over the years, he was essentially putting together the case on the outside. So we'll see. Things might be happening. All right, Trump is doing so much. This is one big area. Where else? Well, a few hours before the show, he puts out a Truth Social. Let me see if I can find it. No, wrong one. He puts out a Truth Social about what's happening with the Straits of Hormuz. And what does this say? Well, let's read it. Iran has just informed us that they are in a state of collapse. They want us to open the Hormuz Strait as soon as possible as they try to figure out their leadership situation, which I believe they will be able to do. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. Heck to the yeah. Okay? He is communicating to all of us, including the Gulf allies, that the Iranians Iranians are collapsing. We knew this. I said to you weeks ago, as soon as China said no more arms going to Iran, it was over. They can't support themselves without a fresh line of essentially ammo. Okay, and China, if they're not doing it, Russia's trying to do it, but they've got their own war to worry about. So what is Trump doing? He's saying, I think they'll be able to figure it out. So he's letting them know, let's go, figure it out. I think you can figure it out. He's letting everybody else know, we're moving, we're going to get the straits open. He's trying to calm the markets down. He's trying to let everybody else know. He is a brilliant communicator, We're going to talk a little bit, if we have time at the end, about him not being a fascist. But right now, I'm going to jump to, and I don't think I actually have, maybe I do. No, I don't think I do. No, I wanted to show you something, but I don't think I have it. Well, let's talk about it. Trump announces that NATO is now going to start funding even more of their defense. That's the Trump effect. All the money that we were sending was essentially money being stolen from us and used as theft and grift and fraud throughout Europe. Think back to all the money that went to Ukraine. We've heard recently that at least 100 million wound its way back to the Harris campaign. We'll find out more about that, I'm sure. The Trump effect. He's changing everything. Go back and look at Sunday's video. I explain the macro version of Trump's plan. One of the things I say is that a critical component to being able to change this sort of globalist neocon, what they call the rules-based order, blah, blah, unbelievable, word-smithing, euphemistic, nonsense. It was not a rules-based order. It was rules for them while they extract wealth. Okay, Trump is changing all of that. But in order to do that, since a lot of it is revolving around the oil, energy, is we had to become the largest producer of oil, which he did. Drill, baby, drill. Once he did that, now he can control that market, not literally control the price, but now he can provide oil for any country or gas through America. So they don't have to go to Russia or Iran or Venezuela. We also took Iran and Venezuela's, well, Iran, we're in the process of doing it, Venezuela's oil. So now what happens? We find out today that the UAE is leaving OPEC. OPEC is the cartel of mostly Middle Eastern states, OPEC plus included Russia, I believe, of oil producing nations, so they can control the price. So they didn't get essentially, if you want to, if you're a sports fan, what OPEC is like a luxury tax or like a salary cap is to sports. That's what OPEC was for oil and natural gas. They didn't want to compete so hard with each other that they drive the price down by driving the supply up. We have rules against that in America, but they're not American. UAE is one of the largest, well, that's not true. Saudi Arabia is the largest producer. UAE produces way more than they're allowed to sell because OPEC restricts the amount that can go on the market. It also restricts what they can do in terms of exploration, pipelines, and other things. Why? They're trying to do like the salary cap does. If there was no salary cap in the NFL, Jerry Jones would own all the best players. So if there was no salary cap, they'd kill each other by, instead of keeping the price high, they'd produce so much the price would go low. I don't know if I'm explaining that right, but that's what OPEC is. It's a cartel. The UAE is leaving. Why? Because they are realizing that energy is the single most important asset that helps a country thrive, and everybody needs it. And with the US now the largest producer, what UAE realizes, oh, wait a minute, we don't control this anymore. I want to strengthen my relationship with Israel, which I started to do in the Abraham Accords. And I want to strengthen my relationship with America because they're now the biggest producer. And by the way, I'd like to make some more money, and my capacity is probably what, 5 million barrels a day, and they're probably allowed in the OPEC world to produce 3.5, something like this. And they can also build more pipelines and do other things to essentially make them a bigger producer than they're allowed to be, which means they'll bring in more money. It weakens OPEC. Trump manages this stuff. Now, there's also probably some truth to the fact that this Iran situation destabilized everything. Some of those countries, don't like it, but they're with Trump right now. So that probably lent into it. But what Trump is doing is changing the world. All of these things. So that's a giant piece of news that I haven't seen covered. It didn't come out that long ago, but it was today. But we're going to see how that ripples through. And we'll see if others peel off of OPEC. Remember, with commodities, when the price goes high, money piles in to produce more of the commodity. Why? Because the price is high. Then what happens? When the supply grows so much that it outstrips the demand, the price comes down. Then what happens? The money gets pulled out of discovery, research, development, trying to find more, building infrastructure. Why? Because the price is low and you can't afford it. You can't justify it. So that's the market. That's the seesaw. OPEC was trying to change that, and they did. And it worked very effectively when they were the largest producer in the world. Now that the U.S. is the largest producer, changes everything. I have, I've mentioned before, my friend Ned, whose name isn't really Ned. He's in the Middle East. He didn't want his name, given out. He's a real person who has been over there for, 30 years. He's an American, but he's of Middle Eastern descent. And he was telling me before I came on the show, sort of a bunch of these issues that are happening over there. And one big issue he mentioned was, he said, all of this nonsense about how they're going to replace the dollar with the yuan, he said that's always been nonsense. No one in the oil producing world is doing that. I mentioned the dollar swap agreements that Besant announced late last week with Middle Eastern countries and some Asian partners, and how big a deal that was. And how he said that those countries have balance sheets that are stronger than our traditional swap partners. Think Europe. Okay, think Asia. So Ned was saying that all this conversation about the yuan changing, the dollar-denominated oil and gas trade was always bogus and never going to happen. He said it's too big a business and nobody really trusts China. So the dollar might be the dirtiest shirt in the dirty laundry, but it's also the cleanest, dirtiest shirt. I said that wrong the first time. It is the cleanest, dirtiest shirt in the laundry. It's all dirty, but it's the cleanest, and that means something. So good old Ned over in the Middle East says, this is big news. It could shake up other things. No one's moving out of dollars, even though they might want to. And Trump is having an effect. He's not as big a fan of Trump as I am, but he has to admit Trump is having an effect. Okay, so much happening. I do want to get to a couple of other things. Healthcare. Healthcare is a major problem. Obamacare sucks. Okay, the Democrats party line vote when they passed it. It is, without wordsmithing everything, it is the step towards socializing medicine. You see, you can go on social media. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of videos of people talking about the horrendous outcomes of Obamacare and how much it's driven up cost. Obama sold it on two giant lies, because the left has to lie. One, he said, if you like your plan, you can keep your plan. Two, he said it's going to make it more affordable. I think he said it was going to save you $2,500 a year. It cost 10 times that. Why am I bringing it up today? I'm bringing it up today because the great Peter St. Onge, again, another guy that if you are not, where is it? Hold on. Nope. Let me find it. If you are not watching this guy's X account. You're missing out. Okay? Here we go. Let me put this up. He's talking about, there it is. Okay. Europe's universal health care, I can even hear the sarcasm in his voice, is built on fleecing sick Americans who foot the bill for pharma R&D while European countries buy pills for pennies. US taxpayers pay 45% of all pharmaceutical innovation, and we still pay 3x for drugs Europeans buy at cost. So when everybody wants to say socialized medicine is so great, it's not socialized medicine. Somebody's paying for it. This is why people like the great Milton Friedman say things like, all debts are paid. There's nothing for free. We're paying for it. We're paying for the Europeans to get cheap drugs. Just like we're paying for Ukraine. Just like we're paying for the Somalis to send their entire GDP in our tax dollars back to their country. Just like we pay Mexicans and other illegals who remit the money back to their country and support their corrupt country. The American taxpayer has been being fleeced, as the great Professor St. Ange says. He puts out a video, by the way, 5 days a week. He does a recap on a podcast with all of them put up together. It's like 20 minutes long. Superb. Every day you will learn something. Highly recommend it. But he's pointing out today, we are the ones who pay for their universal health care. There is no free. Maybe tomorrow I'm going to get to another scam. I've talked a lot and I showed it in some videos. The federal government can print money. Inflation. That's what causes inflation. You know, a robust economy does not cause inflation. Printing money causes inflation. Okay? Increasing the money supply. Why am I bringing that up around this drug? I'm looking over here because I have it in my notes. Because when we print money, we drive the cost of things up. Okay? We've been being fleeced and paying for the universal leftist healthcare system in Europe. Meanwhile, when that goes up, our working wages go down, and that delta is the wealth gap. Okay? It's not all that complicated. The left wants you to believe that it's super complicated and we can't, we need to be in charge and we need special people from Harvard and blah, 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 blah. Not true. Okay? The federal government can print money. States cannot print money. So what do? They have a workaround. They have all these, what they call IGTs, intergovernmental transfers, at the state level and between the state and the federal government. What does that mean? Just what it sounds like. The federal government prints money and then transfers it to the states, various states, and not all on the uniform basis. And the state uses it to mask their leftism or their crappy policies. This is going on in California, pretty much all the leftist states. They will have some program like some reimbursement for something to do with Medicare. And they'll submit a bill to the federal government, our tax dollars, for say $1,000 for something. What they're reimbursing in state is like $100. So they're keeping that delta, that $900. That's how the state of California gets around the fact that it can't print money to get itself out of its problems. So whatever deficit they're reporting, you can be sure the deficit is 2x that. Why? Because they're taking federal money through various intergovernmental transfer programs and covering up their problems. By the way, I suspect that's happening at the universities too. A university puts in for a grant and they get the grant for $100. They probably load up that grant with a bunch of employees who otherwise work for the university. That way, those employees aren't on the university's budget, which allows them to go spend the money on DEI and other nonsense, and we foot the bill. Another form of theft of our dollars. JD and the fraud squad are starting to make some hay. Let's see if it's really happening. The question of the day. Let's see if it's really happening. Let's see if we're going to get some indictments in the grand conspiracy. Let's see if we're going to get this Fauci guy to throw us up the chain to get to the real criminals. Okay? Let's see. Let's see if we can get some of these SPLC guys to start to share with us what was really going on. Remember, without our tax dollars funneled through these nonprofits, we don't have any of this racism nonsense. You don't have Charlottesville. None of it. What would the country look like? Without that Clinton Foundation, what would the country look like without that criminal graft, that criminal grift, excuse me? As I put out, it was maybe Friday of last week, I think it was a worthwhile episode to go watch. What would America look like without the left? Maybe we can start to find out. Trump is not playing games, and neither are his people. They are making stuff happen, and as I say all the time, he is smarter than they are. They want to criticize him and call him a dope, and he doesn't know. They are smarter than he is. And by the way, before we finish out, and I know it's late, there's no fascist who ever shrunk a federal workforce by 300,000 plus people. There's no fascist who wanted to give back to the taxpayers more of their money. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime. There's no fascist leader who said, I want to give more freedom and liberty to the individual citizen. And the way I'm going to do that is getting rid of 10 or more regulations for every one regulation that gets put in. No fascist ever did. No fascist wanted a smaller government. No fascist was in favor of God in schools. No fascist ever did any of these things Trump does. So all of you weak-minded people who are falling for this fascist stuff, they're doing this on purpose to trick you. Unfortunately, it's working. Wake up. Sergey Brin took him a lot of years, but he woke up. Alan Dershowitz took him a lot of years, but he woke up. Stop voting for Democrats. Okay, we're going to be back tomorrow at 2 o'clock. We hope this content is helpful, gives you a different take on things, maybe brings up things that other people aren't addressing. Share it with people. The idea here is that we want to turn people away from Democrats. The Republicans are not necessarily the solution, as the great Dan Bongino says, but the Democrats are the cause of the problems. Okay? Like, follow, subscribe. It very much helps. I'm learning a ton about the algorithm. That algorithm is a son of a gun. So all of that stuff, make some comments, send us some emails, let us know what you want to see on our special weekend editions. And I will see you back here tomorrow at 2 p.m. Until then, I'm rooting for you. Please root for me.